The .380 cartridge sits in an unfortunate place. Many hollow point rounds either give a disappointing 8 to 10 inches of penetration, or fail to expand at all and therefore have a noticeable risk of over-penetration. First of all, you can choose to avoid the problems of hollow points altogether and get a Fort Scott Munitions Tumble Upon Impact, or TUI round. It has great penetration. The YouTuber Shooting the Bull 410 tested many .380 hollow points in both denim-covered organic gelatin and bare synthetic gelatin. I will not be showing you the synthetic gelatin results because I believe they are misleading. Because of extensive organic and synthetic gelatin testing that I showed in one of my videos, I don't believe that you should test expanding projectiles in clear ballistics gelatin. Despite the underpenetration in this chart, I will be saying positive things about both the Hornady XTP and the Federal HydroShock because they performed better in other tests. I would not be particularly hesitant about using these rounds, but if you are, I'd suggest using a non-hollow point design, like the TUI round. Shooting the Bull concluded that the following rounds were the best at reliably expanding and giving good penetration without over-penetrating. The HPR Hyperclean, Hornady Custom, Precision 1, and Fiocchi Extrema all used Hornady's XTP bullet. This is a testament to how good the Hornady XTP bullet is compared to other .380 hollow points. Shooting the Bull also declared the Precision 1 in particular to be the best because of its consistency and penetration. He also tested a hotter XTP load made by Underwood Ammo. It might be because of the small sample size, but it seemed that the increased velocity made it more likely for the rounds to overpenetrate. As I've stated in other videos, more velocity doesn't automatically make a round better. I've also included the Fiocchi Extrema XTP as a point of comparison. The regular 90 grain Federal HydroShock was already pretty good, but Federal wanted to make a self-defense round specifically for deep penetration. This is why they created the HydroShock Deep. .380 Extreme Penetrators and Extreme Defenders have also been tested. The Extreme Penetrators had a tendency for over-penetration with bare gelatin, but not with denim-covered gelatin. Obviously, regular flat-nose full metal jackets are even worse at over-penetration. Finally, the Extreme Defenders both performed well. I would argue that the Plus P Extreme Defender is the best .380 self-defense round you can buy, given the excellent penetration, and the fact that it's not reliant on expansion to do good damage. Some people are curious about what the best .22 rounds for self-defense are, and some may question if the .22 is even effective enough. This is a wide variety of rounds that were shot into denim-covered organic ballistics gel. Obviously, it would be better to have more data than just one round per barrel length, but we can still learn from what we have here. Personally, I'd prefer a non-expanding copper-plated bullet with a flat nose. Such a bullet is less likely to come apart or be stopped if it hits heavy bone. More importantly, you don't have to worry about expansion causing underpenetration. It's very understandable for someone to watch these videos that Kentucky Ballistics made and come away with the conclusion that it's common for .22 and .25 ACP rounds to stop when they hit bone. However, Paul Harrell's video on .25 ACP versus .22 demonstrated that with actual bones, not artificial ones, both of these calibers will easily penetrate the front ribs of the so-called meat target. Specifically, with both the .25 ACP and the .22 that Paul Harrell had used, most of the rounds stopped at either the back ribs or at the t-shirt behind the meat target. People may want more of a specific real-world example though. In Season 1, Episode 11 of the show Crime 360, it portrays the murder investigation of a man who was shot in the back with the .25 ACP. The bullet went through the spine, bounced off the front ribs, and was found loose in the chest cavity. Also, when you shoot the proper .22 ammo from a rifle, it has enough power to reliably penetrate through the relatively thick skull of cows. The .22 category on this chart includes both .22 rifles and handguns. There doesn't seem to be a lot of difference in the lethality rate of .22 compared to other handgun calibers. One would expect that if .22 rifles were effective and the .22 handguns were less effective than other calibers, we would see a noticeable overall decrease in lethality, but that's not the case. If you have a very small .22 handgun, aside from ammunition selection and barrel length, I would argue that the main limit on your effectiveness is practical accuracy. Very small handguns have a small sight radius and tend to have small, crude sights. These and other things make it hard to shoot accurately. First of all, I do not recommend using the Winchester HE round for self-defense. I only included it because it looks deceptively good on paper. The reality, though, is much different. The fragments created make a superficial wound and rob the round of the momentum that is needed to penetrate through things like bone. The Velociter is the clear winner of Lucky Gunner's testing because it had the best penetration. It even worked decently with a 2-inch barrel, with 3 of the 5 bullets fired, meeting the 12-inch minimum. This chart has a few good examples of the underpenetration that can happen with .22 hollow points. It also has a large enough sample size to tell us that such underpenetration is not a fluke either. In conclusion, if you have a barrel that doesn't give you enough velocity for expansion, the Velociter hollow point is good. Despite the Remington Viper's one bullet only reaching 11 inches, I still think it's a good round because the bullet would have went deeper if it had traveled straight and not curved. The Aguila Interceptor is particularly interesting because it is the only round that I have seen tested that travels deep enough to be potentially capable of overpenetration. Without a larger sample size, it's hard to say whether the 18 plus inches of penetration that the one bullet got is a fluke or the norm. I also find it interesting that the only bullet that is specifically made for self-defense, the Federal Punch, has a relatively low bullet weight. Greater velocity obviously seems to be the goal, but velocity by itself doesn't directly equate to more effectiveness. I'd like to talk now about versatility. Some people will argue about whether a .357 Magnum or .44 Magnum are the most versatile handgun cartridge. Let's just take the .357 Magnum and look at the common reasons that people give as to why it's the most versatile. You can use lighter loads, including .38 Special, for target practice. You can get a smallish, concealable handgun and use it for defense against humans. You can also get a powerful hardcast load and use it for dangerous animal defense, like bears. You can also use it for hunting from a long barrel handgun or from a carbine. I personally would argue that most handgun calibers from 9mm to .44 Magnum are all versatile. They can be effectively used for defense against humans, for target practice, and hunting, regardless if you use a handgun or carbine. Calibers like .357 Magnum and .44 Magnum do have advantages over other rounds. They have better external ballistics, less bullet drop for example. You also don't have to worry about the reliability of wide flat-nosed bullets in a revolver like you would with a semi-auto. It goes without saying that .357 Magnum and .44 Magnum have the capability to make a much larger wound than other calibers. You can also find jacketed soft points for limited expansion and deep penetration. 40 Smith & Wesson, for example, are not sold with jacketed soft point bullets. All of these advantages I just mentioned mostly apply to hunting. The better ballistics are more useful when there is more distance between you and your prey, and it doesn't really apply that much to the handgun that you carry for the close deer you run into when you're walking in thick brush. The use of wide flat-nosed bullets also apply to bear defense, as they make a wider and deeper wound than regular flat-nosed bullets. However, using wide flat-nosed bullets, just like using a .44 Magnum, is not a necessity for bear defense. Most handgun calibers will do just fine as long as you use a regular flat-nosed, hard-cast lead bullet. People have demonstrated that you can successfully use a .22 handgun or rifle for bear defense, but I wouldn't suggest anyone going into bear country with just a .22. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. The recoil and limited capacity that .357 Magnum and .44 Magnum typically have somewhat detracts from their versatility. Not every problem can be solved with 6 rounds, especially if that problem is very determined or you miss once or twice. If you don't believe me, you can watch this video where Bob Stash describes a shootout where the suspect took multiple rounds of both .44 Magnum and .44 Long Colt and kept fighting. These shooting statistics have the most detailed breakdown of rounds fired that I can find. They are from the LAPD and help illustrate that the majority of incidents are ended with a few rounds fired, but some of them require more. Greater capacity gives you the versatility to deal with very determined human attackers, as well as multiple feral dogs or wolves. That's something that a revolver may or may not be able to do.